The global economic crisis is taking its toll on stock markets, house prices and jobs. Now it's well and truly hitting New South Wales coffers. The half-year review of the state budget reveals that next year's forecast surplus is now more likely to be a deficit, and that could be the case for years to come. Here's state political reporter Bridget Glanville.
It's only 3 months since the state budget, but in that time, things have got a lot worse.
In the current global economic environment, what I do want to say is that a deficit may eventuate.
Next year's budget was forecast to be $292 million in surplus, but it's now predicted to be $321 million in deficit. 2013-14 is now forecast to be $4 million in deficit, and the following year it plummets to $234 million in the red.
The hope is that we return to a sustainable surplus over the forward estimates. I mean, that's what we have committed to doing.
But that's looking more and more unlikely.
If there are large economic problems going across the globe and they have an impact, you may end up with the position that there is a deficit.
The state's revenue from stamp duty and payroll tax is unchanged. It's GST revenue from the Commonwealth that's fallen. The Treasurer says changes to the police death and disability compensation scheme, public sector job cuts and prison closures have helped improve this year's budget.
It's clear in the literature and the information before you that if action wasn't taken, today what this state would be facing would be close to $6 billion in deficits.
The Treasurer says the government is still committed to $8 billion in savings. The opposition says the government is not prepared for a Eurozone crisis.
This is the first time in over 20 years that we've had a forecast of successive budget deficits.
Next year's budget will be handed down in June. Bridget Glanville, ABC News, Sydney.
And Bridget Glanville joins us now from State Parliament. Bridget, the government says it's committed to returning to surplus, but how's the Treasurer going to achieve that?
Well, Juanita, that detail was missing today, but we do know that the government said that it's still committed to funding major infrastructure projects like the North West Rail Link. We've obviously heard that it's committed to saving $8 billion. Now, the government can't control revenue, largely because of the global financial crisis. They don't know what Europe's going to do. So the only thing that's left really is spending, and that means that the government's going to have to look at things like cutting programs, increasing taxes, cutting more jobs and possibly privatising the poles and wires on the electricity network.
And there's been some bad news for commuters' budgets in the new year.
That's right. Public transport fares are set to increase by 5.4%. Now, that's more than double the inflation rate. Now, what that means for commuters on buses and trains is that they're looking up to an extra $3 on a weekly ticket that they'll be expected to pay. Now, when Gladys Berejiklian, the Transport Minister, was in opposition, she did criticise the former government a number of times for increasing fares. Now, today, that's exactly what this government's done, and they say to keep up with inflation.
We know that it is tough on people, but we need to make the right decision by the community. We've always argued that fares should only increase by CPI unless there are improvements in the system. That is the position we've stuck to. Today's fare increase represents an increase in the CPI only.
And this is an early Christmas present. Fares, Juanita, are expected to go up on the 2nd of January.
Bridget Glanville reporting there from State Parliament.